This is Deb from Never Too Late to Create. We're back again here in 2025, and today we're going to do a little bit of a episode on watercolor pencils and working with them. She can't talk. See, I'm alone all the time, so then when I actually start to talk to you, I'm like, oh, I'm rusty. So today we're going to be working with a watercolor pencil set. It's 36 pieces from, it's manufactured in Vietnam, and it's a company called Raffine, Raffine. So this is a very inexpensive set of watercolor pencils, and they can get very pricey, but this one was under $10. It might get too popular and it'll jump. But it's a nice set of good blend, and I'm still kind of in my getting used to it stage, seeing what I can do with them. So today we're going to go through a few things, and I'm going to show you how I approach working with a medium like this, and I do treat my watercolor pencils as any other drawing utensil. And so I'm also going to show you how I sharpen pencils for this type of use. And as you develop your own style, and some of you want to be a little bit more freer, some people like to get in there and do the anatomical drawings where every little thing that they can see, they try to put it down on the paper, like ultra realistic. We're going to work a lot looser. Okay, we're just going to, because a part of what I want you to do too is experiment with your colors and getting used to mixing and kind of playing with your pigments here, and see if you can't also, as you're training yourself to see and draw what you see, and as you're training yourself to mix colors, you'll hear me talk about the warmer red or the cooler red and the reasons for that, because that's how my brain thinks. So when I look at colors, it's important for me to have a visual to see what it is. And I've always been this way. I've got to start with my color chart, and I need to know what ingredients are in my kitchen. So as you can see, if we switch over to the overhead here, I've got all of these, the 36 colors. I put them in not numerical order, but more so in chromatic order as best I could. We can do, if you want to have some kind of thing to reference like this, you don't have to do a line chart. You can turn your chart into anything that you want it to. You could turn it into a little doodle circle. It's up to you. I guess I'm kind of bouncing between both cameras, not really figuring out which shot you're probably going to use. So, let's sharpen our pencils. Okay, as I said, I use my watercolor pencils as any other drawing tool. I have a particular way of drawing with them, or trimming them, because I'll come right down here to this, and I'm going to take the dark so you can see the contrast. If you can see this pencil, one side it looks like I have a 1/2 inch of the lead, but if you turn it to the opposite side, you see a lot more wood. You only see about a 1/4 inch of that pencil and then the wood. And the reason I do that is I want to support my lead. Some of these pigments in different, like it could be a pastel, it could be just a regular drawing pencil or colored pencil, blanked. And some pencils are very resilient to snapping. Other ones can crumble on you the minute you go to sharpen things. So it's just something that you gotta kind of figure out, get used to. But if you're having trouble with something like that, it might not be you. It could be the material you're working with. So what I am going to show you now is a lot of times I use your regular plain old X-Acto knife. Now, if people don't want you running up and down the hallway with your scissors or anything else, you might want to make sure you've got somebody working with you and not just grabbing a razor blade and start whittling your pencils without parental supervision for those that need parental supervision. For those of you that think you can handle these sharp objects without hurting yourself, I might encourage you to at least check it out, because, well, let's come into this. This is a piece that has been kind of just going through the motions here. I will pick it up and just kind of add a little bit here and there just to see what goes on. And as you can see from this, this page already had the watercolor pencil on it, but I've already used some water on it, and you can see how things have dispersed. But I kind of keep things like this around as, I don't call them finished, I call them experiments. So I will pick them up and continue to play with them, and it's my way of discovering different things about the medium and how it works. With the watercolor pencil, there are lots of different ways to put it on. You can put it on dry and then wet it. You can put it on wet paper as a dry pencil. You can put it on wet paper as a wet pencil. So we're just going to play with a few of these ideas, and let me come back to, I'm going to trim up, which one? You are 557. I'm a little neurotic about having to keep things according to the chart, at least in the general area, because it just makes things easier for me if I don't have to stop and think, what was that I was grabbing for? So I'm going to show you how I will go about trimming this pencil. This one, it's kind of worn down on one end, but on the supporting side, it's basically down to the nub where I'm going to start scratching the paper with my pencil. So what I do is I whittle. I don't have to keep it in the same spot as far as where was that supporting part. I will turn the pencil and whittle it as allows. And I'm just very, very light, because I don't really want to whittle down the lead or anything else. As you can see, now I have that pencil with the about a ½ inch showing on one side and about a 1/4 inch on the other side. So like I said, it's my way of, it was something that my father probably taught me. It supports your lead, and then you can still come down and use the side of your pencil as to cover a lot more space, as opposed to having an uber sharp pencil. And let's come from, probably take this one just to show you what happens. This set came to me through somebody else, so it's I was like, wow, look how long they got that lead going. But they also have that lead broken off, so it pops right out. Sometimes what I will do is I might wet that and put it right back in to see if I can get it to kind of meld. Usually the minute you put pressure on it, I'd let that dry, but I don't necessarily throw that away. But if I can get it to stay in the pencil itself, which at this point has kept it to an actual lead, or what am I saying? If I can keep it in the pencil itself, which at this point is acting as a holder, I can still take like this piece and use it same way I would with, pastel, anything. So the difference between this watercolor pencil and also your colored pencils is the watercolor pencil is dissolvable. A colored pencil is not. Usually colored pencils, depending on your manufacturer, will have a little bit more wax, or will have wax in them. That's a whole nother subject, and I do have a tendency to get off track, as you know. But while we have these two light areas just doodled out or scribbled out, I just want to show you how nicely these colors activate and with water. And this is also why I do the color chart, because if you looked at what color I was using this pencil, if I just judge at the end, it looks like it's a brown, but I couldn't tell that it actually is a very nice. If you were buying a paint of tube, you would probably call that a raw umber. So I did go through this the other day to kind of give names to some of these colors, and I'll use those as I'm referring to them, to help you kind of learn some of the lingo or get more used to some of the color options you have. So what I was saying is, if I'm putting this pigment down dry, it looks like a very dark brown. But the minute I activate it with the water, I've got actually more of a glowy gold. So this is why I'm a big stickler on having my swatches. And I don't have to run around with something all official. Even if I just grab a handful of pencils, I will usually swatch out everything so I can see what is in my kitchen and what do I have to work with. So okay, so today we are actually going to work with some of these colors, and I just want to kind of show you a doodly way. We're going to make some trees. These are my willow tree samples that I've been playing around with. This is actually half of this set. I am working on breaking it into two sets that have some sense of chroma, because I don't necessarily always want to walk around with 36 pencils. I might want to take as few pencils out and about as possible. And I can do that because I know how to mix those colors. And that's why you're going to learn how to mix those colors too. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's just something that, as you train your eye to see the colors, and you train your eye to see that blue has a little bit more red to it, or that blue has a little bit more yellow to it, it'll make more sense on, where you go with this and how to, play with things like this without making a lot of mud. Okay. I am going to take a new sheet of paper. We are going to work on just doing kind of a little scene here. Now, when I go to make my scene, I am going to not put my horizon line in the center of the paper. That's, you know, big no-no, because your painting will look much more successful if you cut it into a third, so that your horizon is either in the upper third or it's in the lower third. It depends on what you want it to focus on. So I'm going to put a horizon line on here just in this lower third. I'm just giving myself a bright line. Or, you know what, I actually said, just so you can see what I'm painting here, that I should do this sample in a marker. And I do have a fine marker, but let's see how well this... All right, so I'm going to show you even with this Sharpie and on this paper and with these watercolor pencils and with the adding water. If you want to go ahead and like write out a poem or something in the background of your painting, you can go ahead and do that right at the very beginning. So here I just wrote some words. Let's see. Love, laugh, be nice. So if you want to send somebody a special happy message, we're going to start with our tree trunk here. And I'm going to bring it to my horizon, but I'm actually going to bring a few roots. I'm going to bring him down in there. And that's just a doodle. Now, the basic shape of my willow tree is pretty much just an arch. And you're like, I can't draw an arch. Yes, you can. All of these movements are just things that you just need to stand up, let your arm kind of move around. If you ever look at a willow tree, they kind of have, you have your main trunk and then a few branches come out. Then they have all these little smaller branches that come out. And then you get to the end and there's like a little firecracker of little baby branches. And they all have those nice long tendrils that the leaves just kind of float around. That's a lot of painting, and we're not going to sit there and draw every single leaf because we don't have time for that, and we don't really want that. We're going for the feeling of it. We're not going for a realistic anything. So I am just going to start with one of my yellows. I have two yellows here in this set, and one is cooler. It has a you would refer to this as probably a lemon yellow, or many of the manufacturers will call it a lemon. Primrose, cad yellow light. And then the next color down is, all right, so I was talking to you about primrose, and then cad yellow pale is the warmer one. That's, and it might, depending on your manufacturer, permanent yellow, that's another name. Cad yellow pale. Goes on and on. All right, let's work on our little willow tree. I'm going to start with my cool yellow. Oh, I grabbed the white. Now, if you're afraid that you can't really do an arch, just set your hand down on your paper. Make that movement. See, a lot of this controlling, it's just like when you were a kid and learning to use your pencil to write your name. Maybe you're still a kid. Maybe you're still learning to write your name. Painting, coloring, drawing, it's all takes the same amount of effort of repetition and consistency. So that's where I kind of lost time, or lost the space that art used to have. Art takes a long time. So sometimes something's got to give if you're always running to your job or whatever. So now I look back and I think, oh, yeah, that's why music had the priority. It's a lot quicker. And just being, I feel so lucky now because I'm able to dedicate much more time to working on my craft and rebuilding it, because when you ignore things like that, they go away. And now I'm babbling about that instead of telling you what I'm doing, but I hope you saw that I just was smashing some yellow all over the place. I'm doing a big old scribble. Nothing too fancy. And then I grabbed a green and I did the same thing. I'm kind of just doing that same motion. We're going to think about that willow tree and how its trunk going with the traditional brown so far. Now, I love drawing trees because they remind me of people. And I love the outstretched arms of their branches. They always look like they're praising the heavens. Now, if we needed a true representation of an actual willow tree, you might want to work with a little bit more reference. But we're not worried about that. We're just playing with our colors. We want to see what we can do with things. And we're going to just explore. Do I have to stop at just one color per section? No. What happens if I want to... Well, let's get into our sky here. We'll just start with one of these typical cyans. Now, there again, I can put my hand down there and just give myself that nice, and now if I had a sharp pencil with that sharp point, I couldn't cover as much paper as I'm doing right now. So if you're trying to do it this way, but you're working with a pencil that has a point on it as if you were writing your name, you might not get as much lead to lay down. I'll just grab one of these that have... This is just a even cheaper brand. This lead is not very... It's more for writing right at this point. It's not as shaved down. I still just get kind of that smaller. On this one, I can cover so much more space quickly as opposed to this one. So I still get it down there. It doesn't matter. Now the red, your brown is combination of all of your colors basically. But you know, if you think about it, a brown is a variant of an orange. And then we're going to add our complement, which would be the blues. I did not bring that type of color wheel out. And I probably should have, but too bad for now. We won't worry about that. Okay, I'm going to took one of the greener. This would be along the lines of a cyan. You might know it as a manganese. Right now I'm using a slightly greener version, more turquoise. And I was also going to use, this is another one of the colors that 533. If you look at the pencil, it almost looks like it's dark blue, but it's actually what I would consider to be the ultramarine blue. I'm going to come on here a little heavy because I just want you to see, or I want you to see if you can see the difference. See, I'm not not being too fussy with what direction I'm going in. Now, again, I'm putting a lot of pressure on these pencils, and that's what I like about this set, is it takes you can put a lot of force on what you're doing, and I can really scribble in there pretty firmly without it cracking and breaking on me. Now, I do have other sets that I could pull out and show you that they would just kind of start to crumble. But this set is very nice. Now I'm just kind of throwing in a little bit of a base because I want to connect my tree to the bottom of the world here. Another thing on this paper, which is it's a very soft watercolor paper. One thing I noticed that sometimes I could kind of dig a hole to China if I went and put too much pigment down in one spot. And that just means I'm roughing up that paper enough that it's lifting up the fibers and it's creating a hole in my paper. I recognize that this is not the greatest watercolor paper, and that's why we're using it, because we don't want to use our super good watercolor paper for our masterpieces. This is all experimentation. These are all just for learning lessons. Now, another thing, the top of my tree looks pretty boring because it's just that arch. What happens if we come in here and just bring a little bit more sky in and kind of cut up some of those shapes a little bit more? Give it a little bit more realistic. Now, as I said, the color that I'm using right now, 533, is the color I would refer to as a ultramarine blue, which is one of my favorites. It's the one that will read very vivaciously. Ultramarine, cobalts, those kind of glowy, well, cobalt blue. Not all cobalts glow. And these are all just dyes in these things. There's nothing chemical going on. You can tell that because of the price. If these were pure pigment, they would be much, much more expensive. I'm going to add a little bit of warmth into my little tree here and a little variance, because right now it looks all pretty. You saw me putting these blue things in there. You're like, what the heck? Those are just kind of, I'm bringing in sky holes, as they call. Coming up here. And I have no reference to work with. We are drawing from imagination. We're just playing. Now, right now, it doesn't matter if I'm putting this blue down here, because if I decide that I'm going to use a green grass and be very typical, I can still work that blue into my color. But that doesn't mean that I need to do a green grass, but I could. What I have fun with is, I like, as I work with these kind of colors, and when I'm just doing some kind of random doodle without some kind of reference that I'm trying to follow easy to just kind of play with and say, yeah, what happens if I do this? And that's what I'm trying to get you to do right now with these watercolors is we're working with a dry paper. We're working with dry pencils. And I'm going to move this along just a little quicker here, just so we can go on to some of those other things. When I'm making these marks, I'm just indicating branches. I don't want to, this type of drawing, I'm not going to get into a whole lot of detail. But I'm going to start making these. Remember how I said that if you look at the willow, they kind of have these little, like the little dog hair tufts that come flying out in different clumps. Some days I'm just so articulate. All right, I just want you to see what happens if we start to add some water to this. I think I began to say how a lot of times as I do these kind of things and I'm just playing with color and not really trying to do anything in particular, I'm just picking colors that I like, or maybe I want to see what happens if I layer that on top of this. Because right now everything's dry. So what happens if I come in? See, I'm not drawing a branch. I'm just indicating. And that's part of a more freer style is you want to suggest things. You don't want to necessarily spell them all out. People will get it. All right, so now we have dry paper. We have dry pigment on our paper. I'm going to take, this is a round brush. This is very inexpensive. This is another round. I'm going to take one of these bigger ones just because they hold more water. Dipping into my water, I'm tapping the excess off, and I'm going to grab my little cotton rag here. As a watercolorist, I control how much water I'm using on my paper with my little, this is a flannel, piece of flannel towel. And you can use paper towel, just whatever rags around. I usually dip in the water, knock everything off, and I still tap my blotter just to get that extra water off. And then you're like, but you just dumped the water back in there again. Yes, I did just put my brush right back in there because I want a bunch of water right now. See, this is the fun part. Now you're activating those pigments in that dry pencil and the colors can come to life. Now on this brush, it will splay and I can use that to my advantage. And by splaying, what I mean is that my bristles will kind of, I can keep them out like that, and then I could come in here and make little marks. But a lot of times I'm just wetting things down, smooshing them together. If you find something that looks a little bit too strong, you can easily soften it with just adding a little bit more water. I'm just rinsing off my brush because I'm going to come down here in this other area that has some lighter colors on it, and I want to try to keep things fresh. I'm not over schmoozing these things. I'm just kind of putting a little water on there to activate things and get it going. And the whole time I'm looking at the shapes. You know, the things that we all can do so commonly is we repeat too often. It's like the spacing is the same, and that's the type of thing that you want to look at. You know, are you adding enough variance in what you're doing to make it interesting? Am I babbling more than I need to? Yes. Okay. All right. Now another thing is, as you can see, I'm almost scrubbing this. You don't have to just totally wet the whole thing. Let's come back to this drawing. It's kind of nice when you can leave certain things, like this is dried pencil right there, but then some of these other areas have been wet. And the other thing with the fact that this is watercolor, you can always come back to this and continue to work with it, because unless you put some kind of fixative on a watercolor, it is always dissolvable. See, and I like flicking that brush and just letting some of those colors go. You can use these on a wet paper. So I had just added some water to that area. I'm going to come in here with a little bit stronger yellow. Maybe I want to take it over on. So don't be afraid to play with the different colors that you have, and just your different pigments, and get used to what can they do. Okay. You can always come back in, soften with that brush. And another type of brush that I will use is, and these are the little cheapy brushes that came from the cheapy set. I also like the fan brush, and then just a regular straight brush is good. Oh, another option that you have is these water brushes. They come, and the chamber in the back here is full of water, and then it has nylon bristles on it, and you can, usually I just dip it in the water to get it started anyway. And so this is another way to carry a lot of water, or to take something along easily without a whole lot of, plus this is all just nylon, so it's not like you're taking your $50 sable brush out and losing it on the bus or whatever. These are, I don't know, I think I got a set of 7 or something, and it was under 10. So it's an option for, let's say you're traveling. And that's another good thing about these things is, yeah, it doesn't take much to take something like this along. You can get yourself even a small little flat container, or even just a small set like this. Keep everything compact. Keep everything compact, and take a little watercolor brush. Take one of these water brushes along, and then you might not necessarily need to run around with a cup of water if you have this. Experiment and see what works for you. Now, so there's my little willow tree for now. I'm going to let this guy dry. Here's a couple other willow trees I was doing as just more experimentation. I wanted you to see that if you did want to write some whatever poem, novel, you can easily do that on your paper with a waterproof marker. You could do it with the pencils even initially as kind of a shadow, and then come back and put an ink more readable on top. This one I also playing with kind of putting words within all of this and just experimenting. And I experiment with, this is a bunch of different layers of all of these colors, and you can mix them all together and then add your water and see what you have. Maybe you'll have a mess. You can get another piece of paper and try again. So this side is already wet. This side is still dry. And I'm going to come in this time with just this fan brush, which I like because you can scrub away. Some of these I'm just kind of softening the areas, but for my purposes, this reads enough of a willow tree. Once this dries, I might come back here with a little bit deeper colors so I can, in fact, let's not even wait for it to dry, because I was going to show you how we can, I really do always think I have this organized. And then I start talking and it goes on. All right. This is another way that you might want to just kind of to get yourself used to what you're working with. Because watercolor pencil is versatile, where you can use it dry, you can use it wet. Here I spritzed my paper, and so I'm taking just the spritzer and I am hitting that once, and so I have kind of an uneven watercolor or water disbursement on this at times. So I just wanted to see, well, what happens if I do come in here with my dry pencil, how much pigment can I get on there? And I have a very uneven spritz right now, so it's going to be kind of a little bit of a surprise. I might try to get into some areas, and it, like here, now there's not any water, so it's going on much drier. And in these areas, you can see the different lines. This is actually kind of acts as a, or looks like when you have a drier marker and it's kind of giving up the ghost. So that is just using the paper somewhat wet. And on this one now, I was playing with just what happens if I do get all the paper wet. As I said, see, you can always come back in here and keep schmoozing everything out. It doesn't have to stay there, because your water's going to dissolve that pigment and turn it into big fun. All right. I'm going to re-wet this whole area, because that part of what I'm doing too, I wanted to see how dark can I get with these. And I have found that some pencils work better dry, and then I come back and strengthen them after I wet them, let them dissolve. Because when I look at my my colors and I look at that against a value study or value chart, you know, I know that some of them are a number 10 and other ones are, we'll use experiment. I know that some of them I can match up to something as dark as my 10, as dark as my darkest dark. This would be basically, it's 10, probably about 80, 64, and then just nothing. So I use this as kind of a eyeball, keep things around, see, well, how dark can I get with this? That probably means nothing. All right. Another thing that I noticed, sometimes when you're coming back on these wet again, you can get the buildup enough that you can start kind of shoving it around a little bit more, and it makes more of a pattern. But see, this is why I'm not trying to show you how to just paint something, because I want you to explore just the color. I mean, we can work on shapes and sizes. Another thing you might want to do too, if you have some of those books with the coloring books, as long as they can handle a little bit of water, those are always a fun thing to color with. Now, another thing, I'm going to pre-wet my paper. And I'm letting it soak in. You could do that with any paintbrush, it doesn't matter. And on this one, I'm going to do pencil dipped into water on dry paper. So I'm going to leave this guy alone. But this is my pencil dipped into the water. And then I have a pre-wet paper. So I'm putting that down. I am going to give myself a purple sky today. All right, so I was supposed to dip that pencil into the water before I came onto the wet paper. This is how I evaluate things, because see how it makes kind of a, anytime you stop, it makes that little mark. And it's just another way of getting a little bit of texture in there. I think I began to talk about how a lot of times as I'm working, I get a kick out of things that will turn kind of into rainbows regardless, just because I'm following the color trail. Pencil dipped in H2O on dry paper. So I'm dipping that, and let's see what happens when I So that's actually kind of interesting, because at points like here it's all wet, and that's how it was coming off on my paper. But then it hit some areas that's a little bit drier. But now I've got these heavier clumps of pigment that are kind of coming off of this because I have dipped it into the water, and so it's making it a little bit heavier deposit of that pigment because it's been softened up. So see, even if you do something like just that vertical line, you can give the sense of, you know, a forest in the background. So let me, I'm going to have a pink willow tree. Or is it my sky that's going to be pink? So I have a wet watercolor pencil on wet paper. Lots of uneven blobs. So if that bothers you, you might not want to get your pencil wet that way. You might want to try just using it dry and then coming back with your wet brush to merge things in. So that's why we're just experimenting to see what happens. All right, I'm just going to dry that off. Kind of doing those arches. Focus just a couple spots. Kind of act like where those little branches come flying through, but if you have any willow trees in your neighborhood, go stare at them. Start to, actually when you do this kind of stuff, you do, at least I do, you start to pay a little bit more attention at the shapes of different things and what's going on. All right. I am going to spritz this with just my sprayer, because if I do hit that with a brush right now, it's going to smoosh everything together. Right now we're just going to lay some color down. And we're trying it with the pencil dipped in the water and then coming onto here. And we're doing that right next to our sample where we have the pencil dipped into the water and it's on the dry paper. Oh, I didn't even dip that one into the water, but my paper was nice and wet. So see, this is kind of nice to see how strong that color can come out. How it is controlled in your work is totally up to you. But this is why I'm a big advocate for just play with your materials and get used to what can they do, because you don't necessarily need to have the top-notch drawing skills of a professional artist at this point, but you can get yourself started and you can start to show get your eyes training. I used to always, as a kid, young adult, I would stare at things and I would think, okay, I'd take my ultramarine blue and I'd add a little bit cad red and so I would stare at things and I would wonder I'd talk to myself about what colors I would take to mix that. So these look quite horrendous right now. I'm gonna dip that. I'm not used to working with these wet. I prefer to actually work with them dry and then manipulate the pigment afterward. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to try to use it. That's why you are testing things out, because you might find you're like, oh, it's just not me. Or you just might find it's a little trick that you already worked out and now you can use that for something else in the future. All right, I'm coming. Oops, I keep forgetting to dip that. So sorry. But it's funny. You can see how bold you can get with some of these colors. Oops, rinsing that off as if it is my brush. Now, another thing you will find, too, is the different manufacturers, the pigments will react a little bit different and dissolve a little bit different. They might have different strengths. Okay, I'm coming back down here to my little cheapy brush from the cheapy set. This is considered a flat, and this is a number 6 in their book. But so this is already wet And so see how everything's aren't just like coming to life the way they were when they're dry. And you're coming in, bringing this up here. Does that make sense? No, it does not. Okay. We'll be quiet. What? Just to keep you wondering. Yeah, I like the control that I have when I start with it dry. But the thing is that the more you work the colors together, the more it makes sense. Your piece kind of starts to come together a little bit better. So, play around with your pencils to see, do you like working on a wet piece of paper with a wet pencil? Do you like working with the dry pencil on a dry piece? Another thing, this is a little $1.25 stencil from the dollar store, and I took a Sharpie, the fine point one, and you can take big ones, whatever. This Uniball might run, I forget, but you could trace out whatever words you want. When you're working with a stencil and you're trying to figure out where to put your next guy, you want to line up the letter before. If it has a bottom to it, try to line that up to your next one, and it should, but you might want your letters all up and down and whatever. I'm not trying to make these the best things. This is a very, very floppy stencil. It's just what I expected for $1.25, but it's handy. You could use something, and if there is something that you're trying to spell and you're not so sure of your own abilities to hand letter it, you might want to check out some of the stencil options. And as this one proves, you don't have to invest a lot of money into it. But now, not every black pen is waterproof, and so you'll want to check that too. But what you can do, I'm coming back in here, I'm going to be doing the dry paper again, because it's my favorite. And I'll just build up a couple layers, and I'm not trying to stay inside the line. I'm a rebel. The more you work with these colors, like these two purples, this has a bit more blue to it. So this guy would be considered the cooler of this color. And this one, can you see the more red in this? It's okay if you don't. And if you're colorblind and you're going to use that for your excuse, you still can see value. And that's one thing. I mean, you could still do your painting. You actually might have a very interesting painting because you are painting by choosing color by value, not by pigment. So you can fill in these letters if you want, and then you can come back with your paintbrush. Let's come back over to this one. See, as you can see, I just scribbled all these things. I'm going to get one of those smaller. No, I'll just use this. If you're using a flat brush, you can use every side. So I can come across and use this to just wet things very nicely. Just going to rinse that off. Another fun thing you can do with this and it'll help you later on when you're painting your water. I'm just going to take a flat brush, which is this one. I'm just going to wet that and pull straight down. I'm just going to encourage the pigment to kind of flow down toward me. So, see how quickly you can just put together something, write somebody a nice little note, put it on a card with your little watercolor pencils, and you've added a little bit of water, and you're like, wow! And they're so impressed that you did all of that. Another thing I've been doing with these pencils is I pick them up pretty often just to see how dark can I go. And I'm actually learning how wet you can go on some of these things too. So I'm, for instance, just playing around with an eye shape. I'm going to come in here with a little bit of a wet brush. Don't be afraid to scrub around with that brush, and you can easily I just saw I wrote some note on this paper. Anyway, fun. Another thing I look for as I work on something like that is how much does it dissolve, and once it's dried, how much will it continue to dissolve, or I'm just building up more layers. So I think that's about it. I can keep going, but I think I probably bored you enough already. So I just want you to get out there, get out your little colored pencils, use your stencils, use your imagination. Just try to create something new, positive. Send out a happy message to somebody. Please send out good, positive energy. We are reaching some really scary times, and we need to change the dynamics of the world's energy. It's getting quite negative. So go out, do something nice to somebody else unexpectedly, just because you know you can. Be nice, and good night.